So I'm Jerry Garfinkel. I'm the treasurer of the Jewish Studies Center. And I have to tell you that our classes are free. Our instructors are very good. But we do have expenses, for example, for Zoom and other things. So we do encourage donations. If you want to donate to us, go to our website, www.jewishstudycenter.org, and click on donate. And then you can donate either with credit card or through your PayPal account or via check. If you want to send a check, the website will give you the address to set where you send the check. This whole session is being recorded, as you probably noticed. And after the class is over, the session here is over, I will edit out the part that begins before we actually began the class. I'll post the recording on YouTube, and then I'll send an email to all the registered students on where the recording is. Also, the closed captioning is on. So if you're hard of hearing or you can't understand my accent or Jay's accent, whatever, you can look at the transcript or the closed captions. We want everyone to, we want your comments and your questions, but please put them in the chat, both comments and questions, and address it to everyone. Sometimes you put a comment in the chat, someone else will put a comment with respect to your comment. At the end of Jay's presentation, people will ask questions or we'll look at the questions from the chat or whatever. We'll take care of the Q&A portion at the end. I think that's about it. So what I'll do now is I'll introduce Jerry Stilkin, who's a colleague of mine, and he'll introduce both Jay and the class. So Jerry, you can take it away. You are muted, Jerry. You're still muted. Go by your picture and let's see. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. My fault. Now try to unmute yourself.
Yay.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jerry Stilkin. I have known Jay McCrensky for many years in various guises, klezmer musician extraordinaire. He is also, though, a scholar and professor of Kabbalah. He's taught it for some time. He has an ongoing class free in Kabbalah too. He is now the president and founder of the Contemporary Kabbalah Institute, and he will give some more information about that, I hope. So to keep it sweet and short, that's it. Jay, please take it away.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, let me put this on gallery so I can see everybody. There we go. And yeah, we got about 82 people here. Welcome, everyone. This is part of a 2-class series, a mini course on everything that you'd want to know in Kabbalah to know if you like it or not, sort of. Kabbalah can be very complex. The way I present it, it can be very accessible. That's what I'm going to try to do. We'll have questions at the end, so make a note of your questions. You can raise your hand anytime on the screen where it says reactions there at the bottom. You can raise hand, and then we'll take the questions in order at the end and unmute everybody at that time. So everyone should be muted in the meantime so we don't have background noise and other things that could disrupt the presentation. So the first question that you probably has is, McCrensky, what kind of name is that? Is that a Jewish name? Well, it is a Jewish name. It was Medansky, more of a Polish name. And my grandfather's older brothers, when they came to the US in the 1890s and moved to Boston, thought that, well, everybody seems to be a Mick, so they added Mick to their name, and it became McCrensky. So most McCrenskys are still Jewish, if you meet any. But the second question is Kabbalah Jewish? Because Christian Kabbalah was a main theme, even more popular than Jewish Kabbalah for several hundred years. But Kabbalah was the essence of Judaism and Jewish practice for 300 or 400 years, from the 12th, 13th century up through until the 18th century. And it became lost because the rabbis of Poland met in 1724, something like that. And because they were concerned about the proliferation of these Shabtai Tzvi, Sabbatian clubs and groups and congregations, young people. And they were into Kabbalah, and it was thought that Kabbalah is so dangerous that only learned Jews should study Kabbalah. And they forbid the teaching or study of Kabbalah to anyone who wasn't at least 40 and at least learned in Torah and particularly Midrash, because as you'll see in these two lectures, Kabbalah is surreptitiously subversive to the Midrash and to Jewish tradition. So they're concerned about that, and they wanted to stop the Sabbatean movement, but they didn't want to stop Kabbalah, but that became the effect. Within a generation, Kabbalah became lost to Judaism. Yet, Kabbalah is central to understanding the rituals of Judaism, many of the prayers of Judaism, the structure of Jewish ceremonies, and Torah itself, the Kabbalists, can only be understood if you understand the symbolism of Kabbalah. We're going to learn that symbolism over the next two sessions, and how to understand the Zohar, which is the central. It's called by many erroneously as a text of Kabbalah. It's not a text. It's a compilation of a doing of Kabbalah, of exercise in trying to draw revelation out of Torah, new insights, make new discoveries, and draw that down so that we can receive, the students, the disciples, the teachers, the community can receive the insight of Torah and of everything that we do. So do you have to be over 40 to study Kabbalah? Is there anyone here under 40, who's over 40, under 40? So I don't see anyone under 40. Oh, we'd have to ask them to please leave. No, that's not true. There's nothing that is dangerous or improper or anything to be concerned about in learning Kabbalah, other than that you're going to become a much more enlightened individual and Jew. Do I need to believe in God to be a Kabbalist? That's a relevant question to Kabbalists, because a central starting point of Kabbalah is that God is undefinable. You can't not believe in what's undefinable. You can only feel the presence of God, feel the flow of emanations coming into yourself and into the world. It's a constant flow from God. Kabbalah, as I mentioned, was mainstream Judaism for hundreds of years, and most of the rituals are Kabbalistic, have lost their meaning. Why do we break the glass at a wedding? Why do the bride circle the groom 7 times? What is this business with the lulav and the etrogs? Shaking it in 6 directions. This Passover is thoroughly a Kabbalistic holiday. The Haggadah is totally Kabbalistic. I'm going to answer the questions that are coming into your heads as I'm saying this. Well, what's Kabbalistic about all that in the course of tonight and next week? What Kabbalah is not is important to start with, because there's been so many misconceptions since the 1730s when Kabbalah was forbidden to be studied, and so it became associated with magic, with superstition, with everything negative in that became associated with Kabbalah. Everything negative in religion generally. The occult, it became viewed as dangerous in that period because nobody understood Kabbalah, including rabbis, because they weren't in rabbinical schools in the U.S. and in yeshivas worldwide. Kabbalah was not taught. It was forbidden to study or to teach Kabbalah. Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, very enlightened chief rabbi, and very accepting of all traditions and interpretations of Judaism. He said on his deathbed, one thing that I'm so sorry for, that I repent for, is that I taught as much Kabbalah as I did, which was hardly any. And yet he felt, and he was a thorough Kabbalist in his thought, and everyone knew him as a famed Kabbalist. Abraham Joshua Heschel was, I called him the closet Kabbalist, because he never taught Kabbalah, yet he came from a whole history of Hasidic rabbis, and his writing on the Shabbat, his concept of awe and radical amazement. It's all Kabbalistic. This concept of Shabbat, creating holiness in time, all Kabbalistic. But he taught Kabbalah through his writings, but not teaching it directly, as you're going to learn it tonight. So, what is Kabbalah then? Right? Kabbalah is a philosophy of religion, not just Judaism, but a more widely a philosophy of religion, and a theology, a theological framework that is a foundation for mysticism. But another thing it's not is a synonym for Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah is a philosophy. It's a thought system. But out of that came Jewish mysticism and a whole tradition of Christian mysticism, starting in the 14th century and 15th century. Many converted Jews and aroused the interests of theologians in Christianity, and Christian Kabbalah became far more prevalent in the 18th, 19th centuries than Jewish Kabbalah, which almost dropped out of existence. So it influenced in that period many core philosophical philosophers, let's say, of the Enlightenment and modern philosophers, Locke, Kant even, and Sir Isaac Newton wrote more treatises on Kabbalah than he did on science, and poets, Yeats, and the author of Shakespeare plays was believed by many scholars to be a Jewish woman who was into Kabbalah. Apparently, there's a lot of Kabbalistic themes in Shakespearean plays. So the starting point in understanding Kabbalah is this concept of unknowability of God. It's called Ein Sof. It's the aspect of God that's unknowable, without end, infinite. The infinite flows, emanates potencies into the world, but we can't know the source. Black hole. Maybe, but we can relate to and connect to these flows into the world. And these flows into us make us partners in ongoing creation with God. It's something that Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote extensively about, man in search of God and God in need of man, that partnership. And to Kabbalists, the book of Genesis is all about that partnership in ongoing creation. Creation wasn't ended in 6 days, and then God rested. It started again on the 8th day, and it continues now. And we're partners in ongoing creation with God. There are 4 themes in the Zohar that relate to this receiving. The 4 types, categories of receiving. I call them the Cher, C-H-E-R, like a Jewish dance, the Cher. The first one is the C, which is creation partnering. These flows of these potencies of God, like wisdom and understanding and kindness and power and coalescence, balance and harmony, principles, the ability to have emotion and be motivated. All of these enable us to be partners in ongoing creation. So the Zohar is an exercise in doing Kabbalah, not on Kabbalah. They're trying to draw revelation on the theme of how we're partners in ongoing creation. What is Torah teaching us about ongoing creation and our role in that, and about righteousness and about feeling God's presence? Well, so that's the C, is creation partnering. The H of Cher, C-H-E-R, is holiness. It's the second category of what we receive, is the ability to be holy. Something just happened to my screen here. Something came up on my computer. I'll just say, I don't know what
I
that's
still
about.
see you, Jay.
What?
I still see you and hear you.
You can, okay. I don't know what this is that just popped up asking for a password. Oh, I just hit cancel. Yeah, it's gone. So sorry about that. That's part of online lecturing these days. So the H, holiness, important category. If you don't understand the holiness aspect of Kabbalah, you can't understand the spirituality of Judaism, which is why Judaism was become lost since the 18th century, become sterile. But holiness, being able to receive holiness and become holy and make Shabbat holy, is core to the spirituality of Judaism. What is holiness? Holiness to Kabbalists is defined as balance, equilibrium in the world. Balance and equilibrium and harmony and oneness and unity are all concepts of holiness. And that holiness flows into us. If we receive that holiness on Shabbat, which we do by lighting candles, by saying the Kiddush, we become holy ourselves, and we make Shabbat a period of holy time. What Abraham Joshua Heschel was talking about, without going into how that's done, by drawing down holiness into the Shekhinah, the presence of God in the world and within us, the ability to feel God's presence, to have a spiritual experience, to have a mystical experience. That's Shekhinah. And that capability makes the Shabbat holy. And that is the meaning of the prayer every Friday night that we say, called the Chadodi, that hardly anybody understands. It's all about bringing about this unification between holiness itself, aspect of God, and the Shekhinah aspect of God into oneness and making the Shabbat holy. So that's holiness. The third category is called ethics, repentance. You got to have ethics in order to have repentance. You got to be able to identify what sin is. In order to believe in God after the Holocaust, you've got to have a sense of what evil is. How can you believe in a God that has created evil in the world? Yeah, we have something as part of the ethics of Kabbalah called the evil inclination among all of us, an inclination to sin. And we become out of balance when we sin. So getting back into balance, return to balance. Teshuvah is called return to balance and harmony. That's what Teshuvah is. That's what repentance is. So Kabbalah brings a whole meaning to Yom Kippur. And finally, the R, C-H-E-R, is revelation. And that's what the Zohar is primarily about. The revelation is on the top three themes of creation, holiness, and ethics. But the revelation, the Zohar, is primarily about that, the striving and discussion between a group of rabbis, about 10 of them, each building on each other to try to discover, which is what the word is for revelation in Hebrew. It's the same word as discover. They're trying to discover the meaning to themselves and to the world of Torah. The Kabbalist Torah is a transmitter of revelation. And the Zohar is in turn a transmitter of the revelation received by these Kabbalists. And it's a compilation of several hundred years of writings. It's not something that was just written in the 13th century, but it was edited and put together, and perhaps most of it was written out of the discussions every Shabbat on the Parshat of Shavua, on the weekly portion. It's, as you'll see next week when we get into the Zohar, it's beautiful poetic work that's hugely, has enormous depth of meaning as well as beauty. So that's the share. So the next thing I want to talk about is how we receive. What is this combination of emanation, sort of a Neoplatonic concept of God emanating potencies into the world, and our ability to receive it, and the ability to receive is where you get to the mystical as opposed to the theological side. And we receive, according to Kabbalists, in the form of 10 different channels of receiving. And I'm going to pull this up, and that's one of your handouts that I hope everybody has, but I'm going to pull it up on share screen, called the Tree of Life. Okay? And let me see if I can do that efficiently. And here it is. Wow, I've never been so good at that. So here you have, you can't see it all at once, but this is called the Tree of Life. Colors are significant here. And here on the side is revelation, ethics, holiness, and creation partnering. So there's sort of a hierarchy, which is important in understanding many of the rituals of Judaism. Why do we have 4 cups of wine? And all of the 4s relate to these 4 levels. You have triads here, 3 triads. 1, 2, 3, and finally the ability to feel God's presence, the Shekhinah at the bottom. And you have 3 columns, a right column, a left column, and a harmonizing central column. And these 10 categories of receiving, or classes of emanation, are all ways that enable us to be co-creators with God, give us holiness, enable us with ethics, and give us the opportunity to discover revelation. Keter, color is black. Ehyeh is the name of God associated with Keter. I will be what I will be, sort of a becoming, a verb aspect to understanding the unknowable. And the concept of world to come is not to Kabbalists the afterlife. It's the world that is coming every day through this flow out of nothingness, out of the ununderstandable Keter. And the first flow out of that is wisdom. And that flows into intelligence. That's a very deep concept. And Kabbalistic writing is very interesting on what is wisdom, what's that amorphous entity that flows into the fast-flowing stream, as it's called. It flows into the womb of gestation, called intelligence, or literally understanding. Wisdom and understanding, two different things, but that's part of God. When we have wisdom, when we're wise, and we have insight, or inspiration, or imagination, that is an aspect of God coming through us. It's something we can connect to, that we can relate to, that we can thank God for, that we can connect to. Bina is the ability to gestate and develop that wisdom into ideas, into content, and then the ability to articulate it is down here in terms of principles, values, laws, ethics, and purpose in life. And Hod is from the word Hoda'ah. Hod means majesty, but Hoda'ah means gratefulness. But it really involves all of the emotions needed to carry out what you've drawn from wisdom and understanding, but by the powers below here of Netzach and Hod, into a concrete purpose for yourself, for society, a meaning of life. In other words, it's Netzach, and Hod, its companion, is the ability to carry it out. So remember, you have a right side and a left side. The right side is Chokmah, and the left side is intelligence, understanding. And below that, on the right side, is all the good tendencies we have to want to create for good. Chesed is loving kindness. It's also the ability to have empathy and altruism, to have a conscience. But that alone needs to be paired with its sister, which is power. In order to create, you got to have a wise idea for a new building. You're an architect, you're going to build a very wise building. You got to know how to do it. And you have degrees and years of learning about structure and everything involved in building this new building, new temple, whatever. But you have to have good purpose and compassion, and you have to have the money and the means, the gevura. All of those are flows from God, enabling that creation. The other aspect, besides just pure power, the hammers, the nails, the strength to create, is what's called deen, which means governance. And to Kabbalists, that means coalescence. That God is creating, and we are creating more potently through coalescence of forces into matter and energy into matter, of life, of single cells life into all sorts of plant and animal life, and into organs, and into human beings ultimately. And human beings into families and tribes and nations. And now with the internet in human genome, into multiplying the ability to coalesce, universities that collaborate. So that is a force of God that comes into the world. So we've talked about all of these: wisdom, intelligence, compassion, power and coalescence together. We talked about principles that are drawn down, hopefully with both the power and the compassion in balance. We talked about motivation. What is it that balances all of this? The nucleus of this is what's called Tiferet, literally meaning beauty, balance, equilibrium, ecology, oneness, holiness, and harmony, all in one. And it's the holy name of God. The Yud He Vav He is the same as Tiferet. And that holiness is what brings harmony and balance between the right side and the left side. And it all flows into Yesod. That word all is one of the names of Yesod, which means foundation. But it signifies life itself. This is the God of life, the El Chai, El Shaddai, another name, the nurturing side of God, that God that we pray to for healing, to see that our needs are fulfilled, the God of our instincts that gives us drives. But it also means righteousness, because all the flow comes into us. But do we have righteousness? What is righteousness? It's the ability to make the world right, to Kabbalists. It's what we just read in the Torah, in the story of Joseph. Ultimate, according in the Zohar, the ultimate development of the world in Genesis is Joseph, who's able to save the world from starvation and save his family and pull both the world into unification and his family into unification, into a people for the first time. But then what's happened in this past week's Parsha on Shemot is something's missing. A new king arose in Egypt that did not know Joseph. Joseph is the same as Yesod. All the forefathers represent different sfirot, as the Zohar interprets Torah. And Torah comes alive with a whole new level of meaning, a hidden meaning below the surface story of individuals and events, and personalities. And Joseph being the ultimate righteous, first introduction of righteousness into the world, is able to pull it all together and save the world. But this new Pharaoh did not know Joseph. So what was missing is Netzach and Hod, was mission and purpose and the motivation to carry it out. And that's what Moses is. That's what this parsha that we just read is all about. God's giving the first purpose in the world to Moses, and he fights it. But he says, I can't do this. I can't speak. I stutter. I don't have the strength to do this. So, well, I'm going to bring you a partner called Hod, which is Aaron. Aaron will be the spokesperson for you. He can convince people. You just tell him what to say. Abraham is Chesed. That represents the evolution of the ability to receive Chesed in the world. And Isaac is the ability to receive Gevurah and Deen. And Jacob, Israel, is the ability to receive harmony, balance, and holiness. You see how the Kabbalists begin to take this a level further in terms of revelation on Torah. What is this really saying? Understanding that these stories of Genesis, of personalities, all represent this tree of life. And as I mentioned, this was core Judaism for hundreds of years. We lost this. And then finally, all of this comes into our ability to receive holiness and receive all of this and feel God's presence. And the name of God for Malchut is Shekhinah, the presence of God, the closeness of God, God that we can connect to. And that's where we can have a mystical experience. And then we become God-like in terms of emanating with the help of the Shekhinah and the God of life, El Chai, and the God of balance and holiness. We can emanate these potencies and be co-creators with God. So that's a quick overview of these core concepts of the 10 Sefirot, okay? Each of them are a cluster of meanings and are a cluster of symbols. This is much broader than just wisdom. It's all of these. Chesed, for instance, is empathy and kindness, altruism. And Tiferet is balance, equilibrium, ecology, itself, harmony, as well as holiness. So there's a cluster of meanings and a whole cluster of symbols with respect to these. But let's apply this to something more concrete, like repentance. Connected to the left side is something called Yetzer Hara, the evil instinct, evil inclination, something that pulls us to the left, to intelligence, power, and emotion. If you have intelligence, power, and emotion, but you're short on wisdom to sort of balance our intelligence, of compassion and altruism to balance our raw power, and principles, values, and purpose to balance our emotions and our motivation, then you have sin. You have the potential for sinning. If you have a total cutoff and you only have intelligence, power, and hatred and jealousy and negative motivations, then you have Nazism. And but we cannot be co-creators with God without the left side. We need the left side in order to create. We need the intelligence to go along with the Chachma. We need the power to go along with the Chesed. We need the Hod to balance, in order to achieve any sort of purpose and mission of Netzach. And most of all, we need the righteousness that God flows through us, to us, in order to heal ourselves, but in order to create what's called tikkun olam, fixing of the world. Kabbalistic concept, thoroughly Kabbalistic from the 16th century. That's the mission of humanity, and specifically of the Jewish people, to repair the world. So you see how this interrelates to understanding of Judaism. Other aspect of this is the upper and the lower. This is the upper, is the unknowable God, source, let's say, and you have wisdom and understanding, and out of understanding comes the lower 7 Sefirot, 7 streams, they're called, streams of light, streams of energies, however you may want to view them, streams of influences, called Shefa, S-H-E-F-A, which means of overflowing influence, from the verb hashpi'ah, to influence. And these forces is what's really necessary to feel God's presence, to connect to these forces and be a co-creator. Okay, so that's an understanding of evil. I wrote a whole book about understanding evil through Kabbalah. And I wrote a second book called, right here, Connecting to Judaism through Kabbalah. And that goes through all the Jewish holidays, elaborating on the Kabbalistic meaning of the rituals of that holiday, the prayers around it. And let me end the share here. How are we doing on time? We've got time. I want to end in about 10 minutes and leave time for questions. And somehow I lost the full view here. Oops, just a second. I'm about to run out of battery. I just noticed. If I go off, I'll come back on. Got to plug in the battery. Here it is. I mean, the power. There we go. Okay. So we talked about evil a little bit. There's a holiday coming up called Tu B'Shvat, right? Tu B'Shvat is thoroughly a Kabbalistic holiday. Good example of what the Kabbalists innovated in the 16th century through Isaac Luria. Actually wrote the first Haggadah on Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is a holiday of the tree, the new year of trees. It's in Torah, and the 15th of Shvat is the day of the counting of trees for the purposes of providing taxation on trees. But the Kabbalists developed that into this tree. This is the tree of life. Oops. I want to share again. Okay, that we've been talking about here is the tree of life. Right? Can you see it again? This is the tree of life that we celebrate on Tu B'Shvat. And the tree of life has 4 levels, and we have 4 glasses of wine in parallel to the Pesach Seder. And with each glass of wine, we celebrate these 4 levels. The first one being Malchut. We open the gates of flow into us with that first cup of wine. And then by eating 3 types of fruit, the first one being fruit you need to break into, like coconuts and all sorts of nuts that you need to use a nut breaker to in order to get to the fruit inside. That will bring us up to the second level, the level of holiness, where we drink a second cup of wine, but this time we add, this is all red wine. Here we add more white wine, right? Red and white, because red is the symbol of Gevurah and white is the symbol of Chesed. Power is what's needed for group 1, first type of fruit that you need. You have an inedible outside. And white is kindness and goodness that we're mixing with the red. Okay? And then we rise from there, the second glass of wine, by eating and tasting and meditating on the tastes, which incidentally symbolizes the flow coming into us. So it's a great meditation exercise and experience, which you get to experience with us if you come to the Farbrengen Tu B'Shvat Seder that I'm going to be leading on February 5th. But that leads us up to the next level, the level of ethics and the balance between kindness and goodness and power, where we drink the third glass of wine and then take the third glass of type of fruit, which is fruit. Well, the second type of fruit is fruit with an inedible interior, like avocados and peaches, and has an inedible core. And the third type of fruit is fruit you can eat all of, like berries and plums, I guess plums, and grapes. And that brings us to the level of Atzilut, as it's called, of emanation, of wisdom and understanding, the unknowable, the mysterious, until we draw it down, where we have the fourth glass of wine. So you see, it's a little story of the development of Tu B'Shvat. Passover is also extremely Kabbalistic, because you cannot be a co-creator and free people, free the world, create tikkun olam without the left side. But the left side has evil inclination. So what is Passover all about? It's about eliminating chametz, which according to the Talmud is evil inclination. We've eliminated chametz, then we can celebrate the left side. We can lean to the left as we drink wine, as we read through the Haggadah, which is all the story of intelligence and power and motivation in creating and coalescing a people. The whole theme of the Haggadah and of Passover is about what we're talking about here, the balance of the right side and the left side, and how we rebalance that in ourselves. Okay. So with that, let me end the share again. Okay, I'm back. If you have questions, this is the time to check off reactions. Yeah, we have 10 or 15 minutes for some questions. Anything that I missed? Did I arouse anybody's curiosity to learn more? To join the Contemporary Kabbalah Institute? Incidentally, I invite everybody to go and check out the website, contemporaryKabbalah.org, which I have not yet put up a donation capability. I'm hoping to do that in the next few days. We're that young as an organization. And then people can make donations, can join as a member of the CKI. The mission of the CKI is to revitalize Judaism through Kabbalah, to create curriculum for teaching this sort of thing, this concept of God as receiving, God as flowing into us rather than God as outside of us, that can be taught to children even in the first and second grade. So,
okay, somebody was asking which book talks about how Kabbalah influences the various Jewish holidays.
that is this book, Connecting to Judaism. It's available on Amazon. Connecting to Judaism, Spirituality through Kabbalah.
Okay, and James has a question he wants to ask, I think.
Yeah, James, you unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you. Early on in the discussion here, you said that Kabbalah was lost to Judaism. Was it lost as so many other religions or beliefs or so forth were lost, or did you just kind of fall out of favor? And if it was actually lost, how was it found?
Oh, those are great questions. It was lost, not gradually, but very quickly. Within a generation, Kabbalah became lost because no one could study it, and rabbis were not even taught it. Yet, the older rabbis were mostly Kabbalists. And even the Mitnagdim, who are, of course, Hasidism grew at the same time. And even among certain Hasidic sects, they didn't teach Kabbalah, only through stories and through symbolism of the stories. But Hasidism is, at its core, is a Kabbalistic movement. Chabad, the name of the Lubavitcher movement, is Chochmah, Bina, and Da'at. Wisdom, understanding, and the knowledge that comes out of wisdom and understanding. Chochmah, Bina, Da'at. So it's, but it was lost very quickly, and it was revived. The second part of your question, James, is that it was revived really just in the 20th century, the 1900s. Gershom Scholem, a scholar at the Hebrew University, became the first real scholar of Kabbalah, and that led to a revival of Kabbalah in the 70s and 80s, and it was only resumed being taught in the 90s in rabbinical schools, and it's never really been taught in continuing education very thoroughly, although there's an occasional class like this. But that's what we're trying to revive, is a rediscovery of Kabbalah and applying it to today in the Contemporary Kabbalah Institute.
Jay, there's a number of questions about your books, and I think that it may be best, you can say something about it, but maybe best also if you send to me a little description of each of the books, and I'll include that in the next email so people will see it in writing.
Okay, great idea. I'll do that. And
somebody else was asking whether they need to know Hebrew in order to follow you in the Institute.
in the class on Monday. Yeah, no, you don't. It's all in English. And although we have some pretty good scholars in the group of Judaism, but the class is totally in English. We study the Mat translation of the Zohar. We've gone through the whole thing a couple of times, and we do it in conjunction with the various chapters of the Zohar, which are all on different parshiot or portions of the Torah. So we're now on volume 4, starting with Exodus. So did that answer the question? Was it?
You see there are 2 people with hands up.
Okay. Yes, I can see if I get closer. Cassandra Semenov, you must be Russian maybe, or?
That's my husband's. He's the Russian. Hi, thank you so much for your lecture. So I have heard of people, a few people who've said they've started studying Kabbalah, and they talk about it takes many, many, many years to really understand it, which I think makes sense. And I have tried once or twice to look at the Zohar, a few texts just on Sepharia, and didn't understand anything I was reading. So I guess I wanted you to maybe speak to, like, what does it mean, or how long does it take to really understand what you're reading in the Zohar, and also how does one define what a Kabbalist is?
Well, one thing I forgot to mention is what Kabbalah means, which means receiving. In Hebrew, the Kabbalah is the reception desk in a hotel. And the Kabbalists call themselves Mikubalim, from the word Kabbalah, meaning receivers. And so it's a concept of receiving the flow of God, in contrast to praying to an external God. Was that your question? Did I answer that?
That was part of the question. Yes.
And how much do you need to know before you really can understand? Well,
yeah.
Just these 2 lectures should be enough.
Okay.
But a lot of the problem there, that problem is a huge problem in Kabbalah, and why it is not caught on is, one, there's a lot of not very knowledgeable teachers out there, including rabbis who have somewhat of an understanding. Maybe they went to one of my lectures or something of that sort. So there's a lot of, so it's presented in much more complexity than it needs to be. And yes, there are complex aspects of 16th century Kabbalah in particular, but many of those are not particularly useful in understanding Jewish ritual and practice and prayer, which is what I want to focus on, is making Judaism more real to people, more spiritually fulfilling, that the prayers come alive. You understand the Kabbalistic meaning of these prayers, many of which are either in the Siddur because they're Kabbalistic and Kabbalists influence them becoming part of the Siddur, or they're written by Kabbalists, like Lecha Dodi, and so many of the Friday night prayers are written by Kabbalists, or they're taken right out of the Zohar. It's just enough, and those prayers you really can't understand unless you understand the symbolism.
One of the early questions in the chat room, Cassandra, I'm sorry, are you okay? I mean, I'll go on.
Thank
One
you.
of the early questions in the chat room was some of us who have heard of Kabbalah, don't know anything about it, just heard of it, also heard, well, it's superstition, mystical, hey, forget about it. And I'm talking about, 1950s, 1960s, after the war. But when you use the term Kabbalah is surreptitiously subversive, and the question was, is that your term? But if it's not your term, whose was it? But in any case, subversively, surreptitiously subversively of what? Of rabbinical teaching as we know it, of the great schools in Lithuania, and in what way does it challenge or is subversive of what most of us have learned in Cheder or yeshiva, whatever?
Let me give you an example of that. And in your first point, we talked about that right at the beginning of the
Right.
misunderstanding of Kabbalah. And I think people can understand now how it was lost and why it took on that disbelief aspect, that erroneous aspect of association with magic and superstition, which is just not true. The surreptitiously subversive, though, is something that I've been doing work on that's becoming more and more clear as the study group is on Monday night, has been focusing on different sections. We've been wrestling with some really tough aspects of Torah. One of which was this past week, it was Shemot, the first parsha, with that strange statement that arose in Egypt a king that did not know Joseph, from a Kabbalist. Well, the Midrash says, well, that's because they didn't know Joseph, the person, and these pharaohs were evil. Therefore, it doesn't say anything about it. Pharaohs being evil. The surreptitiously subversive part of the Zohar is that something was lacking in the children of Israel, the sons of Jacob, they're referred to. Eila Shemot, these are the names of the sons of Jacob, the Parsha starts. And then it goes into that comment about a king that did not know Joseph. And the Zohar, in its surreptitiously subversive ways, surreptitious meaning it's all written in code language that we're going to start learning next week. What is the code language? I touched upon that this week, that these 10 sfirot, our forefathers, symbols of the forefathers are symbols of the sfirot, and so are the colors, and so are the names of God. So you need to interpret and decipher Torah, as I just did, that a pharaoh, the new pharaoh did not know Joseph, did not know Joseph is Yesod, is righteousness, is life itself. And that has, why didn't Joseph know righteousness? Because according to the Zohar, why didn't Pharaoh know righteousness? That within the generations that multiplied so fast in Egypt, they lost righteousness. The seeds of righteousness was lacking, the Zohar said, among the people. And without the seeds of righteousness, the world is going to become corrupted. There is a need for righteousness in the world, or pharaohs will always be coming up, whether they're a pharaoh or whether it's Hitler or whether it's Saddam Hussein or whether it's Putin. You're going to have evil dictators that do not have right side. In the role of the Jewish people, of the sons of Israel, Eila Shemot, these are the names, is to take on that mission, that netzach, that purpose, in order to sow the seeds of righteousness. So I think, given that question, I'm going to add that as something we'll talk about next week, and I'll hand out the Zohar on that, and you'll see what I mean as we decipher that. That's surreptitiously subversive to the Midrash and to the idea that all of the evil is not in the people, even though that's a pretty nasty people through the rest of Exodus and into Bamidbar and right through Deuteronomy. And another aspect is that Moses Rabbeinu, our teacher, righteous Moses, is not such a great person. This corruption of power is a theme, particularly in Bamidbar. And then there's the destruction, the genocide of the Midianites, the family of his wife, of his father-in-law, Jethro, who's the wise. So the Zohar is very surreptitiously subversive on the Midrash. They give excuses and because the Midianites must have been evil and that's why they were destroyed, So you'll see it's fascinating what the message is that comes out of Zohar if you can decipher it. But it's not on the surface, it's under the core through the symbolism.
There's some more questions. People have a hand up. So maybe you might want to.
Deborah, right, sir.
Yeah, I've read Gershom Sholem and struggled through it, and now I'm listening to you. My first question is, I don't know how to react to how to understand all of this, whether these are analogies or what symbols. when you say, for instance, that Yisod is Yosef, okay, what does that mean? In what way is Joseph the foundation of what? I mean, of the tree, I get it, that, but, or the fact that Gevurah and Chesed are balanced, that makes sense, but what do I do with that information?
Okay, that's the subject of next week's lecture.
Okay,
A very good question, though, Deborah. And this, and a very short answer is that this the group of symbolism, this whole complex of symbols that relate to each of the sefirot, are not like symbols as a symbol of that the flag is a symbol of the United States. It's a symbol and the sefirah are the same thing. So the different aspects, some of this complex of symbols are just alternative names of the sefirah. For instance, Yesod is also called the All. But in the Zohar, it might talk about Joseph, it might talk about the All, it might talk about El Chai, the God of life, or nurturing, which is part of Yesod. And you just have to know after a while, as you become more and more versed in Zohar, you translate as you read. It has to be translated. Zohar makes no sense to the uninitiated in the symbolism, which is a lot of teachers of Kabbalah and of Zohar don't understand the symbolism, which is why it's so complex. It becomes much more interesting and much less complex and comprehensible if you understand the symbolism. Right? Those of you who are in the Monday night class that are here, I see Jane nodding. So that's a very good question, but I'll try to answer it more next week with some demonstrations.
I have, I'm involved in Musar, and so I'm familiar with a lot of these words. And Musar is much more concrete and usable, or has been very concrete and usable. And I wonder is there a direct relationship? I mean, for instance, Rav Volbe I've been reading Rav Volbe on Dot, and he places enormous importance to that concept or that midah, but and I see it here between Bina and Chachma as an. Is there a relationship between Musar and Kabbalah that might be fruitful?
Well, Kabbalah has its own framework of ethics and of Musar that's really quite different, and I briefly outlined that, but it's a whole ethical framework, and part of my book on understanding evil and ethics in Kabbalah is to treatise on ethics. It's a whole new approach to Jewish ethics, and it's, I think, even more useful than, in my opinion, than aspects of Musa in terms of identifying one's sin and repenting. There's a whole framework for that. Everything makes sense. And the whole concept of Yetzer Hara, just of evil inclination, makes sense. So, yeah, I think it's two different frameworks.
Okay.
It doesn't come out of Kabbalah, and certainly not the reverse.
I look forward to your next.
Yeah, good questions.
To finish the
I look forward to you joining our Monday night group. So
I'm thinking about it.
And people should put questions again in the chat after the class is over. I'll send the whole chat to Jay, and he'll answer some of your questions, maybe by email, or maybe in the email we send out, or next week, or whatever. But put your questions again in the chat and address it to everyone, and then that's the best way to ensure that your question gets addressed in some way or other.
One other question in the chat was, Kabbalah is something was it studied by Ashkenazi rabbis, Sephardic rabbis, or prominent people? Is it something that was in the Ashkenazi world and the Sephardic world?
Good question, and definitely in both worlds in different forms. In the Kabbalah gave birth to Hasidism, you might say, and that's Ashkenazi. But in the Sephardic world, all 16th century Kabbalah came from Sephardim. It was developed in the Sephardic world of Castile, Spain, in terms of the Zohar coming together and being compiled, and the discussions taking place. The rabbis of the Zohar, according to some scholars, the companions, as they're called, were actual rabbis in the 13th century, the 1280s and 90s, when these discussions took place. The rabbis doing Kabbalah, trying to draw revelation out of Torah and apply this, were Sephardic. But today, the Sephardic Haggadahs and the Sephardic Sidurim have much more Kabbalah in there. That so in that sense, they're more meaningful to Kabbalists. It's the Sephardic. They have the incantations and the formulas that you say in honor of the unification of the Holy One, blessed be He, which is Tiferet, and His Shekhinah, which is the ability to feel God's presence, Malchut, holiness and Malchut. I'm hereby citing the commandment to do such and such, to drink the first glass of wine, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important part to Kabbalists. That's an important part of the Seder, is saying those formulations, that part of the prayer, before then really focusing and concentrating. Kavanah, that's having intention of concentration, a Hasidic / Kabbalistic concept.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jerry. Anybody else have questions? Or
one other question I saw, sort of, does Kabbalah, well, something like the Tree of Life in particular, does all of that come out of one book, the Zohar? Or because, you know, the abstracting these feelings, terms, etc. I mean, who did it, and where did they say at any point, or why they constructed this framework rather than accept the framework that was tradition with?
There are various theories, talking as an academic here, of where and how the Zohar developed and Kabbalah developed. The word Kabbalah took on the meaning of receiving and of being this philosophical base in the 12th and 13th centuries, starting in the 1100s, the earliest, quote, Kabbalistic works. But the concepts, the ideas, many scholars and definitely Orthodox rabbis believe goes back at least to the 2nd century. And it is not part of the Talmud, because Rabban Gamliel was opposed to having anything mystical in the Talmud. and particularly the Mishnah. And it's to be legalistic, the law, the mitzvot. But it is the Zohar repeatedly quotes Psalms. The Psalms come alive. They bring the Psalms alive. This is so Kabbalistic, talking about righteousness and other later Kabbalistic concepts. And Torah itself is so Kabbalistic under the surface, as the Zohar interprets it. So, and then they've discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the angelology writings and writings that are really so very close to Kabbalistic concepts. The whole idea of angels being deliverers of these potencies of God, well, that's Kabbalah. So that's an unknown question, where and how. But no, it's not out of the Zohar. The Zohar is not the chief book of Kabbalah. It is the chief product of about 200 to 300 years of writings in the symbolism of Kabbalah, and many going into the 14th century. One that we're going to study next week about the Sfirot themselves has been dated to the next century, the 14th century, whereas most of the Kabbalah came into being in the 13th century. So, and then there's whole sections of a work called Sefer Bahir from the late 12th century that are incorporated into the Zohar, verbatim, almost verbatim. So it's an anthology from many, many different writers that Moses de Leon, who Gershom Scholem attributed the whole writing of it to. Gershom Scholem was erroneous in that. It looks more to scholars today like that it's the Zohar is not written by Moses de Leon, but he's rather an editor and a compiler of it, because his own works on Kabbalah, which are really written works on Kabbalah, not undoing Kabbalah, don't reflect some of the same messages and philosophies of the Kabbalah itself, of the Zohar itself, I mean.
I see.
Jay?
Yes.
Yeah, I sorry for intervening, but I didn't want to let this pass. Can you say a word about what led you personally to devote so much of your intellectual and emotional energy to the Kabbalah? Was there any particular catalyst?
Oh, well, you must have asked this question with a mission in mind.
No.
As you're representing the Jewish Studies Center.
I'm representing myself.
I know, I'm just kidding you, because I started with a course in the Jewish Studies Center.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I knew nothing about Kabbalah, and I took a course with someone in the Jewish Studies Center, and I thought, this is fascinating.
Do you remember who that was?
Yeah, what's his name? Will come to me in a minute.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
It was someone who was in town, and had done some reading about Kabbalah, and but I became fascinated with it.
That's fascinating. Take a course and you can change your life.
Yeah, and then I started teaching some classes in the Jewish Studies Center, particularly classes on Torah with Kabbalistic interpretation, and then classes of introduction to Kabbalah, and that helps you to learn Kabbalah. And then I decided to start a PhD program and actually get a degree.
Fascinating.
And that took about 10 years. So
That's all.
that's how I got started with the Jewish Studies Center class.
There's
Um,
another question Someone has a question.
Yeah, Toby.
Hi. I have a question about the tree of life, getting back to the actual subject matter. I thought the first written account of the tree of life happened in Sefer Yetzirah.
Oh, no, Sefer Yetzirah is a different, well, it's a, no, is not mentioned in Sefer Yetzirah, but the concept of
Of the
Sephirah,
Sphira. Yeah,
define that term, but define it differently than the later Kabbalists.
right.
It's
But I'm
significant.
reading, I'm just starting, and I'm reading Return to the Place and studying Sefer Yetzirah, and I thought that they had a fairly detailed, although rather cryptic, description of the Sphirot.
Well, Sefer Yetzirah in philosophical terms is a brilliant theory of knowledge in a very short piece of all the knowledge of the world as of about the 3rd or 4th century when it was probably written. It might be as early as the 2nd century work, pre-quote Kabbalistic, which took which took the name of the Sphirot, and the concepts of Sefer Yetzirah became central to understanding the interaction of the Sphirot themselves and the nature and the qualities of the Sphirot, but not the actual meaning.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm new, so.
But there are some 400 extant books or papers, works out there over the centuries by Kabbalists on Sefer Yetzirah. And that is how Kabbalah developed, on these various works about Sefer Yetzirah.
Thank you very much.
Great question. So, Kat. Yes, Patricia.
Okay, I was trying to ask on the chat, but I couldn't. And I have asked you this before after the Monday group, but my reason for coming to study with you was that I was looking not just for a connection to Judaism or a connection to a spiritual part of Judaism, but I have been really, really struggling with in the last several years, but long before I came to Jay, because I've been with Jay less than a year, with the anti-Semitism that I'm experiencing, not personally, but I live in New York, by the way, and particularly in my 2 major professional communities, which one is academia and one is art. I'm a poet as well as, and I was a social worker. I've also I have children that are grown. They don't particularly identify with my field, they don't, they're millennials for the most part, agree or suffer. I think I imposed my suffering on them a bit. They don't acknowledge it, but it's going on in their institutions. And the primary institution that I was affiliated with, and my kids for the last 20, 30 or more years, was Columbia University. And it has really been rife with a lot of boycott. I mean, it's just so intense, but it's not just Columbia. I mean, that's just one well-known place. Obviously, it goes on in other places too. So my question is really, I think Jay mentioned his book. What did you say it again tonight? About evil?
Yeah, connecting to Judaism.
No, it was about evil.
Understanding evil and ethics through Kabbalah.
Yeah. Would you think that would come into this, my ailment?
I think so. Yeah, I think Kabbalah has a lot to say about evil in all its forms in the world. It helps us to understand that, including what you might not call evil, but certainly anti-Semitism or racism is an aspect that I think Kabbalah handles very well. I mean, why is there injustice in the world? And the Kabbalists developed these ideas from 1,000 years of Bible, of the history of Kings 1 and Kings 2, from Solomon right through King Herod. Each one is worse than or is like his predecessors. They're all evil, and power corrupts.
Mhm.
And we see that still today. And it creates a framework and a mission for us to root out evil as part of Tikkun Olam. But so it does say something indirectly, but Kabbalah does say something very deep about the nature of sin and evil and how we deal with it in the world.
Thank you.
But you mentioned poetry and art, and there's some wonderful Kabbalistic poets and artists that have not only done work with the Tree of Life itself and different convictions, and but really have it's just very inspiring work. It's just the Kabbalah can be very inspiring for artists and for writers. In fact, George Lucas was into Kabbalah, and Star Wars is all about Kabbalah. The Force be with you. And of course, Shakespeare is got a lot of Kabbalah, particularly in The Merchant of Venice, all written in symbolism into Shakespeare. Yeah, Kabbalah's had quite an influence on literature and art through the ages.
Is that in either of your books or any of your books, the art and?
Oh, it's not. That's a book yet to be written.
Okay, I'll work on it with you.
Yeah, no, I just wrote about evil and solved that problem, and then wrote about Judaism.
I'm glad you solved the problem of evil, Jay.
The next book I want to work on through the CKI is something on curriculum for Sunday schools on Kabbalah. How do we teach this and create a sense of spirituality and of feeling God flowing in at the youngest age? When the kids are taught to say the Shema, what does it really mean? The Kabbalah has a lot to say about the Shema and how that unifies the holiness of God with our ability to receive holiness, unites Tiferet and Malchut.
I think it may be time to close the curtain a little bit. So let me make a couple comments. Some people said they can't save the chat, and I thought I had set it so you can, but every once in a while Zoom changes the settings. I'll try to change the setting, and I'll also post the chat somewhere. And if I post something and you can't access it, just write back to Jewish Study Center at gmail.com and I'll give you another copy. And in terms of what Deborah was talking about, anti-Semitism, we are thinking of having a class or a panel on anti-Semitism and what we Jews can do to, I don't know, react or stop it or whatever. So we may have a class on that in the next couple of months. In terms of anti-Semitism right now at Columbia and other universities, part of it is diversity is big now, and so there are a lot of non-Jewish influences. I mean, obviously there's a new president in Columbia starting in July, but I don't know that she's anti-Semitic in any way. She's Egyptian, but anyway. Okay, So second session will be next week. Jay, I'll send you the actual copy of the chat, unless you can, I don't know if you can save it yourself. And some of the questions for some reason were addressed to me. I don't know why to me. I mean, you're the one who's answering questions, not me. So I'll send you my copy of the chat and you'll see what everybody said. And give me some more information to put into the email that I'll send out to people about the location of the recording. People seem to want to know more information about your various books, a little bit about what this book is about, a little bit about what that book is about, would probably be useful to a number of people. And also put into the email on how you can start attending a Jay's class, and we'll put a lot more information in the email.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Good.
Thank you.
that's it. And thank you, Jay, and thank you, Jerry.
Thank you,
And
Jerry.
thank you for all the great questions and comments that people have
Okay.
put into the chat and asked themselves. So until next week.
And
Well,
you can save the chat if you go to the bottom of the chat page and you click on the 3 dots, and right there it says save chat.
if somebody said they couldn't do it, so I don't know what the situation
Yeah,
is.
I think that's a new version. They've hidden how to save it.
Yeah.
You have to go to those 3 dots. I just discovered it.
There are no 3 dots in my version of the
Me
chat.
either.
Bottom, very
I
bottom,
can't get down far. Oh, wait, no, can't get
Usually
down
there
far.
are, but not in this one.
under everyone. Yeah, usually.
Oh, yeah, it's
No
there
3 dots.
all the way
Yeah.
at the end.
Very
Right, I
bottom.
can't get down
Down
there.
face, and then to the right. If you have good eyes, you can see 3 dots.
The
No,
bottom
no.
right. Mhm.
Not there in tonight's
I'm
one.
well used to this. It doesn't appear for some reason in this version of chat.
Neither.
Yeah.
If you're using a iPad rather than a computer, it may be different.
Mine
No.
says access to file restricted by your account administrator. I don't know what that means.
I don't know. I guess I'm the administrator. I'm not trying to restrict any access.
No, the 3 dots are usually on the bottom right, not there in a triad. And there isn't. There's just a send
Yeah.
icon.
Yes, exactly. That's what I have too.
Well, it's on the bottom left by my chat.
Mine is bottom right. Yep.
Yeah.
But whatever.
I think it's a good idea, Jerry, to send it to everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, it was very good. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
See
Thank
you
you.
all next week.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Mm.
See you next week.
Thank you so much. See you next week.
And
Thank
feel
you.
free to send me emails if you have questions or if you're interested in donating to the CKI or the class on Monday. Just to stay at contemporaryKabbalah.org.
We'll talk about that, Jake. Some people said they can't access your website. So we'll talk about that.
ContemporaryKabbalah.org.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. There'll be more information, hopefully, in the
Yes.
email we'll send out.